So today we have Eliseo Jacob, who is a faculty member in the Department of World Languages and Cultures at Howard University with a PhD in Spanish and Portuguese from the University of Texas at Austin. He specializes in Latin American street literature, urban popular culture, and the digital humanities. Since 2019, he has been part of the Black Book Interactive Project, which is a Black digital humanities initiative in the History of Black Writing Research Center at the University of Kansas. He also serves as a faculty mentor for DEFCON, the Digital Ethnic Futures Consortium, that provides teaching and research support at the intersections of digital humanities and ethnic studies. His recent publications contextualize literary and cultural representations of the urban periphery as part of a larger analysis regarding the relationship between race, gender, and citizenship in contemporary Latin American cities. Dr. Jacob was awarded an ACLS fellowship for the 2022-2023 academic year to further develop his research on Latin American urban literature and culture. And in 2022, he was a U.S. Fulbright Scholar to Brazil, which resulted in the development of a digital humanities project on the role of artivismo, or art activism, among writing and artistic communities from the urban periphery in São Paulo. This project is the focus of today's presentation and will be published by Afro-Publishing Without Walls, which is a Mellon-funded digital publishing initiative at the University of Illinois. And with that, I will hand it over to you, Dr. Jacob.
All right. Thank you so much, Melissa, for the introduction. And again, thank you to the Florida Digital Humanities Consortium for organizing this wonderful webinar series to do with the research on the digital humanities at the intersection of Latin American and Caribbean studies. So I'm going to share my screen right now. All right, so the title of my presentation today is Afro-Artivismo, Redefining Black Masculinity in São Paulo, Brazil. So as Melissa kind of alluded to in my introduction, this is part of a larger project that I've been developing with my research to do with urban studies, especially to do with the intersection of like art and literary engagement in peripheral communities in São Paulo and Latin America in general as well too. So this project today that I'm going to be looking at came about, specifically through my research through the Fulbright grant I received last year to go to São Paulo to work with writing and art communities there in the urban periphery of Brazil's largest city. And also, too, I wanted to give a word of thanks to several organizations that really helped put together this digital humanities project. The Black Book Interactive Project at the University of Kansas, they're the ones that really kind of brought me into the digital humanities, specifically the Black digital humanities, and really helped me to develop the skills that I have today to really engage with digital humanities methods, tools, and projects. I also wanted to thank Afro-PWW. They're the ones that are going to be helping publish this digital project in the coming months, to really provide that technical support to make this project come to fruition. And then finally, the Fulbright Scholar program for providing the support to allow me to go to Brazil to really work with these amazing communities in São Paulo to really get to know the amazing work they're doing through art and literature to kind of really empower their communities. And in São Paulo specifically too, I have to also give a word of thanks to several important groups and people that really made this project possible. The expression of the top "Estamos juntos" is a colloquial expression that means, we're in this together. And this project would not be possible without their support, without opening their doors to me to really share, their art, their community, their love of really empowering others. So specifically, Teatro Terreiro Encantado, they're the theater group that'll be the focus of this digital project today. Without them and really sharing, their art, their work, their homes with me, this would not have been possible. Here on the left, I have several names. Clayton Catarina, who's the director of Teatro Terreiro Encantado. I'm a great indebtedness to him for really opening up his home, sharing his insights to art, about his life trajectory. Fernando Soledade, for providing some amazing photographs that became a part of this project. Ubade Goulet, another amazing artist and a member of the Teatro Terreiro Encantado. and also Emerson Ignacio at the University of São Paulo, who was kind of my faculty liaison at the university during my Fulbright, really opening some doors for me. And then finally, Teatro Clario there in the middle, the red logo, the space that they use for the arts and for the theater, to see some of this work come to fruition in their space was really important. And then finally, Serraldo Binho, one of the writing collectives there, they really opened some doors for me and also introduced me to a lot of these amazing artists. So without their help, and I would not have gotten to know some of these amazing artists as well too. So the focus of my talk today is really on this digital humanities project that I developed over this past year. The name of the project is called Ritual and Resistance, Theater, Black Masculinity, and Genocide in São Paulo's Periphery. And really focusing on the specific theater group and how they're using kind of the performing arts, as a way to really address a crisis that is going on in a lot of Brazil's major cities to do with, Black youth and state violence, through the police, through economic inequality, and really seeing how the arts can really effectively, address these pressing issues. So that'll be the focus for today for this for my presentation. But before I go into the project, I wanted to provide some context, some background, on São Paulo, why I chose that space, and why that space is so important to understand the social, cultural, and racial dynamics that kind of play out within the project as well too. So here's just a picture of São Paulo, Brazil. Many people may be familiar with São Paulo. It's a really vast city, one of the largest cities in the world. It is the largest city in Latin America, and according to the 2022 census in Brazil, it had a little under 12 million people. And many people don't realize that 37% of the population itself identifies as preto or pardo. Pardo is one of the racial categories, meaning someone that's Afro-descendant, but maybe mixed race. So you can see about over 4.24 million inhabitants of the city are Afro-descendant. And that actually makes it the largest number of Afro-descendants in one city in Brazil. Many times people think of other cities like Salvador, which has 80% of the city has a Black population. But many people don't realize that São Paulo also has a significant Afro-descendant population, as you can see now with over 4 million. And so I thought it was really important to really, dive deeper into that to see, what are some of those dynamics going on in the city, and how are these artistic communities addressing some of these issues. So my research was focused on São Paulo, in particular in the areas in the periphery or the outskirts. So you can see that the yellow circles that I put here on the map were the areas that I was mainly working in São Paulo, especially this past year in 2022. So you can see there in the south, kind of southwest region of São Paulo, the northwest region in the upper left corner, and then out to the far east area as well too. So those are the main areas that I was working in São Paulo. And in Brazil, they have the expression periferia in Portuguese, or periphery is the literal translation. Here in the United States, we might say something like the outskirts, or the suburbs. And in Brazil, usually the periferia has a specific connotation to do with typically working class communities and also predominantly Afro-descendant communities. So there's a certain kind of racialization and class categories that kind of attach to being from the periferia. So that's where my research was, in these three main areas in São Paulo this past year. And then I wanted to show a little bit about, the racial makeup of those peripheral areas. So those same yellow circles that I had on the previous map, I put them to show you those same areas I was working in and how it shows on this map. So this is the infographic that was created by the RNSP, the Rede Nossa de São Paulo, the São Paulo Our Network organization. They put together a lot of infographics to do with demographic information on São Paulo. This is a really great one that kind of shows the Black and brown population makeup of the different districts. And you can see as you go out to the outskirts of the periferia of São Paulo, it gets the darker red. The darker red districts are showing a larger Afro-descendant population. So the darker red areas are like 41 to 60% of those districts are Afro-descendant. So you can see those areas that I'm working in are actually, most of them were actually, the majority of the population was Afro-descendant. So you can see as you get to the core of the city, it gets lighter, much less. And you can see in the upper right, they even put two different districts, Moema, which is a very affluent district towards the core part of São Paulo, has one of the lowest Afro-descendant populations, at 5.8%. And then Georgina Angela, which is in the South Zone, which is actually near one of the areas I was working in, has a Afro-descendant population of 60.1%. So I thought this would be important to kind of provide some context to kind of really show, the areas I was working in, they are predominantly Afro-descendant. And also, besides just being of that racial makeup, these areas too in the periphery also have larger disparities to do with income versus the wealthier areas, larger disparities to do with life expectancy, other issues to do with access to education, also issues to do with state violence, specifically with, police brutality and other forms of violence that can happen in those areas. And so it was really important to provide some context, why these artists, these writing collectives are kind of doing this work in the periphery, because a lot of their work has to do with addressing these issues, to do with, racial injustice, social inequity, state violence. So a lot of their work through literature and art was kind of addressing these issues that we're kind of seeing with the demographic information as well. And so I just wanted to provide a little brief overview of some of these collectives that I came across during my research in Brazil last year. There were several writing collectives, music groups, performance groups that I came across. So this was one of the writing collectives, Será no Quintal. They were in the northwest periphery of São Paulo that uses kind of literature and music as a way to kind of address, social issues. So for example, this was one of their monthly saraus or open mics where they were kind of actually talking about issues to do with Black motherhood and issues to do with, Black mothers not getting enough care in the healthcare systems, and actually doing it through literature. One of the writers that shared our book is actually a doula in her everyday life. So kind of really seeing the intersections between, social issues and literature. You can see some of the music that's there at that meeting. Another collective I came across was Será Elodo Corrente. They're another writing collective there in the northwest corner. Again, they also have monthly meetings where they do poetry, music, as a way of building community and social empowerment. Also up there in that northwest periphery, I came across other groups like Samba de Congo. They're an actual Samba group, Samba collective that actually uses Samba as a way to kind of empower their Black roots, about the Black history in São Paulo. A lot of people don't realize, the importance of Samba music as like a social and political tool in the city, especially for the Black community in São Paulo. And so they do a lot of political work through their music as well too. And then other writing collectives that I came across, this one in the South Zone, Será Lobinho, and one of the collectives that I kind of gave thanks at the beginning of my presentation, for introducing me to the theater group that will be the focus today. We're also really showing the power of poetry and music to empower, the people in their community. And the video I'll show right now is of Ubere Gole. He's one of the poets of this collective, but also one of the main actors and artists for the theater group that will be the focus of the presentation today.
No mesmo tumbeiro pras terras da brasa dito brasileiro. Quer cambar de volta no zóio, revolta, refaz a maloca dito maloqueiro.
And so it was through the Será Lobinho collective that I came across this amazing all-male Black theater group called Teatro Terreiro Encantado. And this, to provide some context, that would be translated to like Enchanted Terreiro Theater Group. The Terreiro is an important space for those that practice religions such as Candomblé or Umbanda in Brazil, which are Afro-Brazilian religions with ties to Africa. So you can see in the title of the theater group, they're kind of tying those things to the Afro-Brazilian culture, those traditions that are important for maintaining their important cultural identity, but also as a space of empowerment and uplifting themselves, in the face of inequity, state violence, and other, social challenges as well too. And this is just some images of some of the theater groups theater presentations they do in the community, to kind of really share their art with others as well too. And this was a theater piece they did called Alto do Negrinho. or Alto of the Little Black Boy. That was kind of a theater piece that was kind of tied to the histories of slavery, but kind of putting it in a contemporary context to kind of really address the issues to do with Black genocide of male youth in the periphery today. So really how they're showing how they're using theater, talking about incorporating things to do with their cultural traditions to really also address really pertinent issues as well too. And this theater project that I'm doing with them for my digital humanities will be part of a bigger series that I'm hoping to do. So this first project that I'm going to share today is on Teatro Terreiro Encantado. And so hopefully this will lead to another project. This is the current project that I'm working on Pau Liderahua. He's an activist, hip hopper there in the periphery of São Paulo. He kind of sees himself as what's called a poeta MC, or an MC poet, where he kind of does the intersections between rap and poetry as a way to kind of socially empower, his community as well. And then I eventually hope to do some other projects, on Samba do Congo and Literatura e Paisagismo, which is called Literature and Landscapes, which was a graffiti mural project in the eastern periphery by an Afro-Brazilian writer named Sacolinha, where he kind of collaborated with different graffiti artists to kind of put his poetry and literature on murals in his community and around the periphery of São Paulo to kind of beautify spaces, but also encourage people to have access to art and literature as well too. So hopefully the goal is this to be a series of projects, looking at issues to do with, race, masculinity, citizenship, and engagement through the arts in São Paulo. But for today, I'm going to focus on the project that's currently under review and will hopefully be coming out in the next couple of months, which is a project on Teatro Terreiro Encantado. So again, as I was saying before, this is a theater group, all-male Black theater group in the southern periphery of São Paulo on the south side, where they're using different cultural traditions to do with music, dance, and art to kind of really address really pressing social issues today in São Paulo, like I was saying before, specifically the genocide of Black male youth in São Paulo and other major cities, throughout Brazil as well too. So before I go more into the project, I wanted to kind of do a theoretical framing of, how am I being guided in this project? Like I was mentioning before at the beginning, when I was kind of giving the thanks to the Black Book Interactive Project and Afro-Publishing Without Walls, for really helping have this project come to fruition. It's through my work with those organizations that I was introduced to the digital humanities, specifically the Black digital humanities. So my work in the digital humanities has actually always been framed by this theoretical framework. And one scholar in particular, Kim Gallen, is someone that I feel that's really provided a nice, really overall definition of what is the Black digital humanities. And this is a quote from her seminal work called Making a Case for the Black Digital Humanities, where she kind of defines what is the Black digital humanities and why is it important in today's work, not just within digital humanities, but in Black studies. So I quote her here. I seek to set in motion a discussion of the Black digital humanities by drawing attention to the technology of recovery that undergirds Black digital scholarship, showing how it fills the apertures between Black studies and digital humanities. Indeed, the Black digital humanities helps to amass the racialized systems of power at work and how we understand the digital humanities as a field and utilize its associated techniques. So the thing that always really drew my attention to her work was this idea of the intersections between Black studies and digital humanities, and using this as a way to kind of mask the larger racialized systems of power at work, and how we use it within the digital humanities as a field and to other associated techniques. So that was something that was really important for me to kind of take as someone that has a background in Black studies, specifically within Latin America. And then coming to the digital humanities, I was really interested in being aware of these kind of topics that she's bringing up, is how are we using these tools? How are we using these platforms to really highlight the Black experience, to humanize these populations that have been marginalized for so long through using digital humanities techniques and tools. And later on in her text, she also emphasizes that as well too, where she says, quote, this tension is enacted through what I call a technology of recovery, characterized by efforts to bring forth the full humanity of marginalized peoples through the use of digital platforms and tools. But this notion of technology of recovery for me is something really central to the work I'm doing. And in the text, she talks about technology recovery as twofold. One, technology recovery as recovering, lost archives, hard to find archives, forgotten archives or experiences or texts, but also this idea of recovery of one's humanity. And I feel that second part is what's really important for how I frame my own work, is how can we use technology? How can we use the digital humanities to really recover somebody's humanity that's been taken away, that's been marginalized, that's been seen as someone not fully human? And that's an area of focus, especially within the Black studies, is, how can we use our scholarship to really, analyze these histories, analyze these experiences of populations, have had dynamic histories in the face of great oppression, to really show the complexity of their humanity and the complexity of their histories. And I feel that's where the Black digital humanities really comes in, to really show how we can use this technology, both in terms of methods and theories, to really, recover, not just these archives, but also, the collective humanity of different peoples. And so that's something that really frames the work I'm doing on this project. And one of the ways that I'm really kind of framing that recovery is through a tool I was using, especially to develop this project, which is called Tropy. It's a really great tool. The same team that developed like Zotero and some of those other tools, they recently developed this tool called Tropy, where you could actually really create your own kind of archive, digital archive of media materials. That's as I was doing my project in Brazil, collecting photos, images, some of those artists too, also sharing some of their own media with me as well too. I needed a place to organize it and archive it in a way, so I could present it into a digital project that really kind of showcased, the importance of what they were doing. So I just wanted to provide a brief overview before I show you the finished project and some of the process I did, to get there. So Entropy is really a great project. You can see I can collect all of my media, all the images, flyers, videos, related to this project that I'm doing on this theater group. You can see there's a lot of information on here. So I wanted to show real quick, how I was collecting some of this information. So up here in the upper left, I put in red. The great thing in Tropy is you can kind of create separate little folders within your project. And these kind of folders kind of serve as almost like the different sections or chapters for my digital humanities project. What were some of the ideas that I'm kind of thinking how to organize conceptually the project. And then also at the bottom, the great thing in Tropy too, you can add tags. So I had my like larger chapter or sections at the top, but then within each chapter or section, there might have been more smaller subsections that I was wanting to look at, or maybe connect across chapters or sections. And that's where the tags are really powerful. You can see here I have probably about a dozen different tags to do with candomblé, Afro-Brazilian religion, capoeira, legacy of slavery, the members from the theater group, topics such as police brutality. So I had different topics, that I thought would be a good way to kind of organize, the images, the web pages, the photos that I was working with. So for example, you can see here I had the section on puppets and masks. And then you see the image there on the right. You'll see there's a little colored dot next to it that kind of ties back to that specific tag. So if I want to look at that tag, I can kind of see all the different images or media that I collected related to that tag. Or this one to do with the members, the different members of the theater group. So I added different images about them. I could actually click on that tag and then see all the different images specific to them. So it was a really powerful tool as I was kind of collecting all this media. It was overwhelming to collect all this media I collected, that some of the artists gave to me too. How do I collect it and organize in a way, to really show the importance of what they're doing, and to organize in a way that somebody from the outside can really understand the importance of their work. And then one of the things I really liked too with Tropy was, you can see here on the left, the different sections or chapters I created with these different folders. So I had one on necropolitics or state violence. And then Tropy, when you click on it, you'll see on the right, it shows you the images or media files within that specific folder. So it's a really great way to kind of organize, your images or media by the different conceptual sections or chapters for your project that you're going to be working on. And you can see within that folder, there's even still the little tags with the little colored dots next to each image or media file. And the final thing I like is you'll see that one is highlighted in blue. And then if you click on that specific media file, you'll actually zoom in even more. It'll show you the image. On the left here, I'll show you the metadata, that you can collect to do with that image. I really like it because in here you can use different things like Dublin core. Tropy has its own metadata schema as well too. I prefer to use Dublin Core because that's a more universalized metadata schema. And then on the right underneath the image, you can see there's actually like a whole little word processing text box. And that's really the great thing about Tropy too. I can actually add in text. You can add in like multiple pages of text in here too. So if you're writing text for your project, it's something I feel that can really show you like the stuff that you're wanting to do for your project later on when you're developing, like fleshing it out in a different platform. So Tropy was really a vital tool to help me really organize all this materials related to this project, to really organize, how do I want to organize it conceptually in terms of the topics and issues I wanted to discuss with about Teatro Terreiro Encantado, what are some of the areas I want to look at more specifically using the tags, and then what some of the text and other stuff that I want to include in here that can provide a foundation for the later developed project as well too. And that brings us here to the final project. So after all that collecting and Tropy, organizing all those materials, I started to build the project in Scalar, which is an important platform, interactive platform where you can kind of have a mix of traditional text like you would have like in an academic text, like in an article or monograph, but then introducing more like multimodal elements and to do with images, videos, interactive timelines or maps, and also allowing you to do stuff in a way such as not having to follow the project in a linear format. You can do that with Scalar, but you can also choose to go in non-linear routes, depending on the topics that are maybe of interest to you in the project. So for the remaining time, I actually want to show you the project that I developed here. So again, like I said, the title of the project is Ritual and Resistance, Theater, Black Masculinity, and Genocide in São Paulo's Periphery. And you'll see here in the upper left, it says Illinois Library, IOPN. So like I was saying before, this is a project that's going to be published by this organization right here, Afro-Publishing Without Walls. So they're a Mellon-funded digital initiative at the University of Illinois, where their focus is to develop and publish born digital projects on the African diaspora. So this is some organization I've been working with in tandem with the Black Book Interactive project during this past year to develop this project. And on here on this page, you can see these are some of the previous projects that they've published in the last several years to do with Black studies. So that really ties back to what Kim Gallen was talking about, the Black digital humanities being this intersection of Black studies and the digital humanities. And I think Afro-Publishing Without Walls really shows the importance of that. And you can see some of their past projects they've done on different Black writers, even one on Jay-Z. And so the project that I'm having is currently under peer review, but once it's finished being under peer review, it also will appear here on the Publishing Without Walls page too, as one of the published digital projects. So I want to show you now the project that I developed. So again, it's called Ritual and Resistance. And just to provide a little bit of navigation before I start going through it, you'll see here in the upper left corner, you'll see a little menu icon. And you'll see it has a table of contents, almost like it's a book. You have your introduction, and you'll see there it has the different sections: Teatro Terreiro Encantado, Theater and Activism, Religious Rituals, Cultural Identity and Resistance, Staging Genocide, The Legacy of Violence for the Afro-Brazilians. So those are kind of the main sections or chapters of the project. And then these last sections are really great. This is where it shows the power of Scalar's kind of interactive elements. You see occupying spaces in the periphery. And this is, we'll kind of all show in a few minutes, showing, the different places on the map where the theater group has done work throughout São Paulo. The same thing with the historical timeline. It kind of shows things to do with the timeline, not only of the group, but also some of the historical topics that they address within their group as well too. So some of these interactive elements really provide a deeper dimension to like what the project is, in terms of not only kind of providing academic framing to do with the importance of their work, but also kind of showing at a deeper dimension to show the context, whether it's geographical, social, cultural, out of which it's coming, that maybe the traditional texts can't show in the traditional, like monograph or academic article. So again, I'm going to provide a little bit of exploration of the text. So you'll see here on the left, there's the introduction up here, and you'll see down here is the introduction. So you can kind of go through it in different ways. So that's really the great thing about Scalar, is that you can kind of just click here to go in the introduction. It'll take you to the introduction page. Or maybe you don't want to start there. Maybe, hey, I'm really interested in staging genocide. That's something related to my area I'm working in. And that's the great thing with Scalar. Somebody can kind of come in and maybe there's a specific topic within the project that they want to start in. And so they don't have to start in this linear fashion. I have to start from the introduction and then go through each section. The user can kind of go wherever they want. So if they want to go to staging genocide, they can go there as well too. But I'm going to go back to the introduction just to show you, some of the overall framing of this. And like I was just saying, I wanted to provide some also context for the project as well too. So as I was saying at the beginning of the project, the urban periphery in São Paulo is predominantly Afro-descendant. And as many of you probably already know, Brazil too itself is also a country that has the largest Afro-descendant population outside of Africa. Over 54% of the population identifies as preto or pardo, as Afro-descendant in Brazil as well too. So here in the introduction, I provide some background context to do with the racial makeup of Brazil, some of the issues also going on with social inequality in Brazil, specifically to do with state violence, for why this theater group is doing work to do with genocide, and why that's so important, and the pressing topic that they're doing through theater. And you'll see here I have some statistics to do from the Violence Atlas of 2020. And this is an infographic I made on the right. And the great thing about Scalar is you can actually click on the image or infographic and it'll show it in more zoomed in detail. So that's the great thing about Scalar, is if you see an image or video, you can actually click on it to kind of make that be the profile. If you want to look at it close up, look at the details of it, and then click the right X up here to exit out. And again, I provided some more images here to do with Terreiro Encantado, to kind of provide some background information about introducing them, as why they're doing this work. We see this pressing social issue to do with racial inequality and state violence, and then why they are important to be profiled in terms of the work they're doing in São Paulo to address this issue. And the other great thing with Scalar is you can see there's hyperlinks in here, so you can actually click on them. So it's a more interactive text. So instead of just being a traditional, like I was saying before, monograph or academic article, you can have these interactive elements. So if I click on this, it'll actually take you to the Instagram page of Terreiro Encantado, to see what they're actually doing now, in the last couple of weeks or the last few days. So you can see some of their work. There's their work they're doing in the communities that I've been talking about in my project. So that's really the great thing about Scalar, is you can have these interactive elements, so I can be talking about them, but then also have the user actually link to some of the things they're doing now, so that's the great thing is, since this thing has been put together, they've been doing other projects, other actions within their community, so having that link to their Instagram is really important to really, kind of show all the stuff that they're doing right now in the last few weeks or even the last few days. And here on the introduction page is also really important. Just like I showed you that table of contents in the upper right corner, it's here on the introduction page as well too. You have all the main sections of the project, the overview here at the top, the theater and activism, the religious rituals, how they're incorporating these, elements to do with candomblé and umbanda within their theater work, as a way to kind of show, cultural identity, but also as a form of resistance to white supremacy, and state violence as well. And then finally, staging genocide, like I'm saying, that's the central core, how are they using their theater, their music, their art as a way to really address these really serious pressing issues going on in their own communities. And then finally, these other more interactive elements, like the map, which is the occupying spaces and the historical timeline. So I'm not going to show all the different sections today, but I'm going to show you just a couple to kind of give you some context as well. So I'm going to go here on the staging genocide just to show you one of the sections within the project, since this is like a core focus, to do with genocide and how it's addressed through the theater arts. So each section will have like an intro page like you see here. So I have the intro to the section. I've provided some text to provide an overview of what's going to be the focus, why this is important. And again, I have different hyperlinks in here. Since I'm talking about issues to do with genocide, I'm defining, how is that being used, not just socially, but also legally. So I have a link here to William Patterson's actual 1951 petition to the United Nations about how Black populations what they're experiencing is a form of genocide. So actually not just looking at it, colloquially or socially, but also legally. How is it being defined by the United Nations? And I think that's really important for finding that context to show how this is impacting the work that Teatro Terreiro Encantado is doing in their communities. So I wanted to provide that kind of theoretical framework before going into the actual representations that the theater group is using to talk about these series of issues to do with genocide. And down here, you can actually see the contents for this section. So I showed you before, like the larger table of contents for the overall project. And then within each section, we'll have actually its own subsections or pages, that go more in depth. So this chapter or section is focusing on the issues to do with genocide. And then I have these three subsections: legacy of slavery, police brutality, and killing the Black body, and then Black power in the face of violence. So if you click on legacy of slavery, again, it'll have some more analysis that I provide. It's really great because then I can really show some of the images from some of the theatrical productions that Teatro Terreiro Encantado has done. So again, this is their main work called Alto do Negrinho that they've done to do with, it's a story actually, a folk tale tied to slavery of a young Black boy that was kind of maltreated and actually killed by the farmer or the slave master. And then the Virgin Mary appears, to save him. And then he kind of comes back, to the farmer, and it kind of really shows that the power of kind of facing that violence, but also the way in which he can resist it in the face of it. And then using that folktale narrative to kind of place it within this contemporary context of, police brutality, of social inequity going on in the periphery. And so you can really see that by incorporating these images within the text, it kind of really illustrates, the power of what they're doing that, just my academic text alone maybe not be able to do. Another great thing, like I said, with Scalar is you can kind of click on the image, so you can get it like more zoomed in. You can kind of see the details of the image. And on the left is the metadata. So you see it has the source URL, it has the title, Farmer's Son with a Whip. It has a description of the image. So it's the actor wearing a mask, as the farmer's son with a whip in hand to punish Negrinho. That's the main character. It has who took the photo, Fernando Soledad Suarez. He was a photographer there from the periphery too, who provided a lot of these beautiful images for the project, when the image was taken, etc. So that's really the great thing about Scalar too, is you can click on the image, you see it more zoomed in, kind of see the metadata details to do with, where the image is coming from, who produced it, the context for it as well too. So that's really the powerful thing to do with this project as well. Another thing too is, like I said, there's the hyperlinks in here. So like for here, I have a quote from Ubere Goulet, who's one of the main actors from Teatro Terreiro Encantado. And the great thing with the Scalar is I can actually click this hyperlink that will take you to the original interview he did, for one of the premieres of the show. And also I can have in here too also, a quote from the interview as well too. So having those kind of multimodal elements really kind of provides extra layers, to the project that I couldn't provide just writing about it myself. And again, here is one of the other sections, police brutality and killing the Black body. Again, so then providing that folktale to do with slavery and then placing it within a contemporary context. I think that's one of the powerful things this theater group does, is the way in which they represent the Negrinho character. So you'll see here is Ubere Goulet. They have this masterful work with these puppets they use to play the character of Negrinho. And you can see him here laid down next to the puppet's face, to kind of show that parallel between, the brutality to do with the violence during the slavery period, and how that white supremacist violence has continued today, with, the killing of Black youth at a high rate in Brazil cities today. So the way in which the theater group really kind of highlights this is really powerful, I feel. And so that was one thing that was really important for me, is using the Scalar platform to really, highlight the work they're doing, not just through the text and description, but with the actual images, the hyperlinks, the videos, to really kind of illustrate, the power of that. And also kind of connecting it to past movements as well here. So here is a very famous banner poem called Be Marginal, Be a Hero from 1968. There was an actual person that was killed in one of the favelas or slums in Brazil in the 1960s. And you can see the way that the actor at the top is also laid out. It's a similar way, to kind of seeing the parallels between past artistic movements and the current as well too was also really important for me to highlight that as well too. And also I wanted to really highlight, the work of other peripheral artistic collectives as well too. So for here, I have an actual interview quote from Clayton, the director of the theater group, by an interview from one of the media groups from the periphery. So if you click on here, it actually goes to their YouTube channel. It's a group called Rádio Busão, or Big Bus Radio. So they're actually like a media network in the periphery as well too, where they kind of interview and highlight the work of different peripheral intellectuals, writers, activists. So it was also really important for me using Scalar to really highlight the work that these other groups are doing in the periphery too, that are also already highlighting, the work of this theater group or other collectives. I'm not the first one doing it. There's other groups already doing this important work as well too. So it's important for me to use Scalar to kind of have those hyperlinks in there to kind of really highlight it as well too. The final thing I want to show you, because I want to leave some time for the Q&A, is this section 5 down here, occupying spaces in the periphery. So a really great thing to do with Scalar is you can have these interactive elements as well too. So I really wanted to show to the users the spaces that the theater group was occupying in São Paulo in the urban periphery. So the great thing about here is I have the map of São Paulo. The one over there, the pin that's over there by the name São Paulo is actually there in the core part of the city, like on Paulista Avenue. But you can see most of the pins are over there in the south side, the south periphery of the city. But I really wanted to show some of the work they're doing. So actually, if you hover over the pin and click on it, it'll say the name of the space, what they did in that space. So here we have the Felizes Festival. If you click on it, it'll actually take you to a new page. It'll say what they did in that space. It actually has images in here that you can click on to kind of see the performance they did in that specific space for that festival. And the great thing with this is some of these images are actually also used in other sections of the project as well too. So they can kind of, and that's where like the tagging I was talking about earlier in Tropy comes into play, is that I can have those images or media files tagged to be for different sections or places. And then when I put it in here, I can actually have them, so they're tagging, they're connecting, so not just being used in one area, they can be used in other sections as well to kind of show how things are overlapping with each other. So that was something that was really important for me as well too. So that was really a great thing, was having this map feature to kind of really show the spaces they're occupying throughout the city, So I think that was something that was also really important. And the final thing I wanted to show was the historical timeline. So Scalar has a really powerful tool. You can have a timeline in here. So I wanted to show some of the things that they're mentioning in their work. So you see here, there's a legacy of slavery. So some of the timeline is about the history of the group, but it's also about some of the issues they're bringing up in their work they're doing. So one of the things they bring up in their work is the legacy of slavery. And actually, when you click on it, it'll take you back to that page that I showed you earlier, to deal with this legacy of slavery. So that's really the great thing about Scalar, is you can have, like I said, these different routes you can take within the project to kind of learn about the work that they're doing. So it doesn't have to be just linear. So if I want to learn about it in this different way, here are songs of resistance, call and response traditions. I can click on that. It takes me to this other page. And this page is actually over here under section 3, religious rituals. So again, it's kind of showing how, the user can really learn more about this project in different ways that's not linear. That, hey, I'm just reading, chapter 1, chapter 2. Maybe I want to learn about the work they're doing in different spaces in the city. Maybe I want to learn specifically about these religious aspects that they're doing in their project. So the goal with this was to really provide, an in-depth presentation of really the dynamic work that Teatro Terreiro Encantado is doing in the periphery, to really bring attention to this present issue to do with genocide of Black male youth, but also showing how, Black males using art and theater can be seen as a form of empowerment, and really the dynamicism that they're using with their art. And I feel Scalar was something that I felt that really kind of was able to really show, the different layers and elements they're really going through in their work that I couldn't be able to do in a traditional, article or monograph. So I'll stop here for right now, but hopefully this provides you some context about the project and the importance of it, and the importance of what Kim Gallen's talking about to do with the Black digital humanities, this intersection of technology and Black studies, and how we can use it as a form of technology of recovery, to really recover their humanity, to highlight, what they're doing in their communities as well. So thank you again for coming today, and hope this provides some insight into the power of the work of these artists in the periphery. Thank you.
Thank you. That was so cool. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording.